welcome to the Wandering Creatives Podcast. I'm your host, Allie, and joining me for today's episode is Emma O'Brien. And Emma is a coach for creative business owners and entrepreneurs, and she is joining me all the way from South Africa. So thank you so much for joining me, and I'm super pumped to have you on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Allie. It's lovely to be here, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, and I happened across your profile. I was kind of scrolling through Instagram, looking for creativity coaches and people who kind of focused on creatives and helping them get their businesses up and running. And I found you, and I was super excited because you don't necessarily focus on like the creative side of it, but you focus more on how to help creatives figure out the business side of what they need to do.
Yep.
And I think that is just so important because a lot of creatives, I guess a lot of people in general probably really struggle with the business aspect of what they're doing because they're usually more focused on that creative side of things.
It's a big thing I found with a lot of the creatives that I speak to and work with, that, like you say, they've got the creative vision and they've got this great idea, but they're not really quite sure how to go about bringing it to life. And I hate to use like this, such an overused term, but to monetize what they're doing so it can actually be built into a sustainable business rather than a sort of part-time hobby that never really does anything. And I think that just having the business strategy is so important with that. And all of a sudden you're a creative, and then you have to become an entrepreneur, and you have to learn, how to market and how to copyright. And there's so many pieces to it. So that's my role, is just helping people put those pieces together and build a well-rounded creative business.
Yeah, and it is so complicated. It's unbelievably complicated. So luckily, people like you exist in the world to help us figure it out, because we definitely need the help. So I'm so thankful for you responding to my random Instagram message.
Oh, absolute pleasure. What a nice message to get. So
and
it's always great to connect.
Yeah. I'm always so surprised at how social media is there, and you can just reach out to people from around the world and connect. And I'm just so excited to have you on, but I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to have you introduce yourself and kind of tell us a little bit about who you are and how you kind of got into doing this business of coaching creatives.
So obviously I'm Emma, and I have been a professional photographer for the past 18 years. I still am. So I still run my photography business alongside the coaching business. And I started my career in the UK back in 2004. It makes me feel very old when I see how long I've been doing this. And I started out my business wanting to be a documentary photographer, and then realized that actually I also wanted to go full time and make money. So I ended up being a wedding photographer, which couldn't get much further from photographing war zones, which is what I wanted to go and do. I mean, I don't know, with some weddings, who knows? But and then I moved to South Africa in 2009 with my partner at the time. And at that point, I retired from weddings because it actually really wasn't my jam at all. And I think we could have a whole conversation about that. It's just, I think with creative stuff, you've kind of got to follow your joy with it and then figure out how you can make the joyful creativity make money for you. So that's been kind of over the course of my career, how it's expanded. And then quite by accident, I ended up photographing dogs. So it's a slightly strange career progression that's occurred. So I spend most of my time when I'm taking pictures now photographing people's dogs, which brings me lots of happiness. And I do quite a lot of shelter dog photography. So it also tends to bring quite a lot of dogs home as well.
That's adorable.
We've got quite a few dogs here. So and the coaching started, I effectively started as mentoring at the beginning of 2019. And I'd started to get people like, messaging me, can I pick your brains about this? And, I've been doing workshops with Nikon South Africa here since 2014. And then we sort of expanded it into business workshops. And then I just thought, there's another angle here for what I can be doing and where people need help. And also, the longer I've been doing this, it's restructuring my business so I don't have to work every single weekend either. Mm-hmm. I think that's the trouble with photography, especially with what I do. It's private client photography. It's generally a lot of time. So partly it was restructuring stuff for me. And what started as mentoring in terms of sort of helping photographers who were further behind on the journey, if you like, than me, has morphed into the coaching where it's actually more. I've expanded it more to helping creatives in a more of a general way, because I think the skills are transferable. And I think the mentoring turned into coaching when I actually went and got some coaching qualifications that just enabled me to do it better. So, but we're always about trying to do things. I think we're always growing, aren't we, as creatives, and just figuring out new things, because I don't know about you, I also get bored quite quickly. So it's you want to learn something new and have a new skill. And I think it's also important for showing up in the best possible way for my clients as well.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And actually, something you said, it's kind of funny because I just had this conversation with a friend maybe 2 days ago. But we had a conversation about, like you said, like following your joy and then figuring out how to make money from it, because that's something that she's kind of struggling with right now, and something I am working my way through, I'll say. But it is being able to say, okay, these are the things I enjoy. Now, how can I make money from them, but also not lose that joy that it brings me?
Yes.
And so that's a really interesting conversation. So when you brought that up, I mean, I have to kind of ask, I guess, because I'm one for myself, because I'm looking for advice always. But like how do you start to go about that? Like, how do you say, like, we'll just use photography as example. So like, I really enjoy photography. I like nature photography and landscape photography. But how do I monetize that? Like you said, like, how do I turn that into something that I can do for a living?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, because I think it depends. I mean, look, if there's so many aspects with it. So if you enjoy nature photography with my business hat on, you could look at, well, do I have a print, like an Etsy print shop or something where you sell prints? Do you put together an exhibition and have your work in a space so people start to get to know your work, and you sell work that way? Do you have that as a piece of your creative business? Because I think the one thing with something like nature photography, it's difficult to get commissioned to go out and shoot stuff with that genre, I think. But it's not impossible to have a range of prints that you sell alongside your other stuff that you're doing. And I think that's the other great thing with a creative business, is having different things that generate income, so you're not reliant on one thing for your sole source of income.
Yeah, the multiple streams of revenue.
Multiple streams, if you like, that obviously don't, because it's quite a lot of work getting print sales going, but it's doable. And I think I know we're talking about monetizing stuff, but I don't think you have to monetize everything that brings you joy. Sometimes you can just do stuff as a kind of personal creative outlet because it brings you joy. And that's also okay. I mean, I did a series of portraits of Black rescue dogs. It was in 2019 now. It's called the Black series. And I I'm big on shelter dogs, and I started this project photographing black dogs against a black background in my studio, which sounds like it shouldn't work, but they look very cool.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
Yeah, and this was a project, so I was like, right, I want to do this project. I need dog models. I'm not prepared to shoot the whole thing for free. So I did a very low-cost shoot fee to get people to bring their dogs so I could put them as part of this project. But it was a very personal project. So obviously it wasn't really commissioned by anybody, and I didn't really have an end goal for it. I just kind of let it unfold. And I was writing about it and putting it together. And, I kind of thought, do I write about this? Like, oh, shame, poor shelter dogs. And I just thought, we're so overrun on socials with negative stuff. I think we're ignoring it now. We tune it out. Apart from the news, which we all tend to jump into and get affected by in our mindsets, which I know we're going to talk about. And I put this project together and I thought, right, I'm just going to have a bit of fun here. So I captioned each of the dogs' pictures like they were describing themselves to go on Tinder. And then I put it on Board Panda. And this project went viral worldwide. And by following my joy, I got a lot of eyes on my work. And of course, the eyes on my work then led to paid commissions. So sometimes it's an indirect route to following joy and getting money to follow, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, makes perfect sense. At least to me it does. I'm like, you're doing what you enjoy and you're just putting out there because it's something you want to share because you love it, then others will be drawn to that. So, yeah.
Yes, that's it. Or not.
Absolutely.
And that's also okay.
Yeah, I love that. And that kind of goes towards I can't remember who it was, but someone else kind of said something similar where it was like, you don't have to share or try to sell like every piece of artwork that you make.
Yep.
Like it's okay to create for yourself and
that's it. Yeah.
And I think sometimes we forget that because we are like in, it's like that hustle culture. Like I gotta produce stuff, I gotta sell stuff, I gotta make money. And we get kind of bogged down in that. But I wanted to go back a little bit about your kind of career path into coaching because like you said, you're still doing photography. And I guess it seems like it was just like a really kind of natural progression into coaching. And you've got you're a qualified life purpose, mindfulness, life coach. You've got all these like certifications. It's pretty amazing. But what was it that drew you to coaching and focusing on creatives specifically, I guess?
So it was my own experience of being coached and how transformational it was for me. Because I think there's a lot of people out there, I think, especially, I'm very acutely aware of it in the photography industry that, everyone's a photography educator these days. And, and that's great. But I think it depends for what the why is behind it, if you know what I mean. So for the first 10 years of my career, and that includes my business in the UK. Sorry, the coffee machine has just decided to turn off. 2 seconds.
I can't hear a thing.
Okay, fine. And if you can hear what sounds like a purring, it's the bulldog snoring. So the coffee machine shut up now. Okay, it's off.
We are fans of dogs on this podcast. So
not so much coffee machines joining in. So the path into coaching was very much because of my own experience of being coached. So for the first 10 years, I sort of bumbled through. My dad's an entrepreneur. So I've been surrounded by someone who and raised by someone who ran his own business. So I've seen how to do it. I've also seen my dad's a bit of a workaholic. So I've also seen I was a bit raised with the belief, if you don't work, you don't get paid. So that's the general rule I applied to my photography business. So when I started my business in the UK and then when I moved to South Africa, I am very good at getting a business up and running and getting very busy very quickly. And which is great because when we go back to the hustle culture that you talked about, we're told, aren't we? Busy equals successful.
Yep.
So, and I had at the peak of my busyness with my photography, people would say to me, "Oh, well, you're very lucky you're so busy," and or when I wouldn't complain and everything else. And I got to the point towards the end of 2015 where I was so burnt out, working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, that I actually got to the point where I almost quit my photography business, because I just thought, you know what, I cannot go on like this anymore, because I'm at breaking point here. I'm not being creative because I don't have time, and I'm fed up, and I'm dealing with ungrateful clients because I wasn't charging enough. And, I had all of these things. So I sat with it. Then I thought, I then nearly closed my business. And I thought, you know what, I've been self-employed for a really long time. I don't think I want to go and work for somebody else. And I'm probably not very hireable.
Yes.
So, yes, indeed. And I just thought, you know what, I like the fact that if I want to stop at 2:00 on a Tuesday afternoon, I can. I don't know if I want to trade that freedom. And I happened upon an advert on Facebook for a business coach. And I was like, oh, I think this is what I might need. So I got in touch with her, a lady called Polly Alexander. So I got in touch with her and we scheduled a call in, and I couldn't afford it at the time. Despite working 24/7, I was completely broke. So it was quite a big investment for me at the time. I borrowed the money from my mum because I just thought, right, if I need help to restructure my business, but I actually don't know what to do to change things. Mm-hmm. And I worked with her. So we started working together sort of end of 2015, and we did 3 months of coaching sort of into 2016. And honestly, the transformation of having somebody, an objective person who, again, with that, we're talking about, people further along the journey, who she had been a photographer as well. So she sort of understood my journey. We doubled my prices, which was terrifying, which then halved my workload. And within 6 months, I had tripled my income.
Oh, wow.
And for me, it was going through that and then this whole new evolution of my business. And obviously people started to pay attention because I was stepping up a lot more, and my work started to win awards because I had the time to do creative stuff that I could then enter into competition. So it was that was a tipping point for me. And, obviously it then took another 3 years for me to start coaching, because I think, you've got to have walked the walk to be able to talk the talk with people, I think, to an extent with stuff. And it was at that point I was like, you know what, I think I'm ready to also help other people, because I know so many creatives who buy into this struggling artist mentality and who stay stuck playing small and not charging enough because they don't know how to do it differently. So yes, there's a very, very long-winded story of how I ended up coaching people.
No, I find it so fascinating. Like it's especially what you said about like bringing in someone who has kind of an outsider's point of view or an objective view of your business. Yep. Sometimes we're so deep into it, it's impossible for us to see what we are doing that needs to be fixed.
That's it. And I think for a lot of creative people, we're kind of solopreneurs. So there isn't an office full of people. There isn't somebody else that understands what you're doing to bounce ideas off you. And I think family can be well-meaning, but if they don't run their own small business and they aren't passionate about creating, it's difficult for them to understand. And, one thing I say to clients who are like, God, why didn't I start doing X, Y, and Z sooner? And you have to say, but if you don't know what you don't know. So we're all doing the best we can with what we've got. And until you have somebody show you differently, or you find out that you can do something differently, how are you supposed to change things?
I've had so many conversations with creatives and artists, makers, musicians, etc. About pricing, and that's a big one. Like it's almost like we need permission from someone to say, hey, it's okay to charge more. Like your work is worth it.
Yes. Yep.
So just having that person be like, yeah, you can do that. It's okay.
Yep. And I can tell you, Allie, so when we went through my coach and I went through my pricing, and we literally doubled the prices, and I was offering quite a lot for not very much, and literally cut right down to what I was offering for the shoot fee. And I sat for 6 weeks when I put the pricing up with no bookings. And I had inquiries, and then I'd have people saying, no, it's too expensive. And I can remember thinking at one point, this coach has finished my business. I'm done. This was a really bad idea. And I remember her saying to me, just hang on, because do you want to go back to where you were? No. So you need to go somewhere else. You have to allow the space for the change to happen. And then I kid you not, 6 weeks later, I had 3 bookings at my new pricing on one day. So then, of course, it sort of boosts your confidence to go, oh, okay, well, if people are going to book at that, that's great. But I think if I hadn't have had the support from her, I'd probably have reverted back to what I was doing, because it's scary. It's scary to sit, but change is scary.
Yeah. Well,
so I totally hear with the, and I think that's why a lot of people stay stuck undercharging, because it's safe. You know, you're not earning enough, but you know you're earning something. And jumping into the unknown, something's better than the nothing that you fear you're going to have if you put your prices up. Oh,
exactly. Yeah. I think we can all relate to that.
Yes,
it's very scary.
Totally.
This episode of the Wandering Creatives podcast is sponsored by Coots Creations, branding and marketing for creatives by creatives. Coots Creations serves small businesses, entrepreneurs, and creatives throughout the country with branding, marketing, and social media management. We accomplish this by creating unique graphics, a cohesive visual brand, and content that tells your brand's story and builds trust with your customers. Visit cootscreations.com and book your free consultation today.
And so I want to talk a little bit about kind of the type of coaching you do, which I know probably varies, based on the client and what they need. But can you explain a little bit about how creatives may find this type of business coaching useful?
Yeah, I think I'm sure you and I can both relate. Being creative, you're not always very good at applying logical, linear strategy to things. And we're often very good. Yeah, there we go. Good at coming up with ideas. And then you might start something, but you're not really quite sure how to finish it, or you get bored. So a lot of what I do is helping people put together a strategy for changes in the business. I've got a photographer I'm working with at the moment who is starting a new business. And it's just being able to take an overview and say, right, where do we want to be going? This is the goal. And here we are starting, and helping to implement, to plan out the steps that you need to take to get to where you want to go. So a big part of it is strategy. Another big part of it is accountability as well. Of, if you're paying somebody to coach you, you're going to get the work done in between the sessions, because otherwise you're wasting your own time and money. And I think that's a big thing. So it's accountability. And I think it's idea bouncing as well. I love helping people come up with ideas. Something I find super exciting. And just that support in what can be quite a lonely industry to be in. And to have somebody else who also can understand where you're at, relate to it, and say, well, I've experienced something similar, and this is how I dealt with it. Yeah, so I think there's quite a lot of pieces to what I do. So it's a bit of a blend of mentoring and coaching. I think it would be safe to say what I do.
What you were saying, the brainstorming aspect of it.
Yes.
I mean, that is so. It seems like it wouldn't be something that you would need, but it is amazing, to just get on a Zoom call with someone and just start spitballing ideas, and just having someone to do that with is amazing. So that's a super useful aspect, I would think, for
and I think that's probably one of my favorite pieces of coaching, of kind of bouncing ideas with people and having people go, oh, I never thought about doing that. That's really cool. Or I didn't realize I could do that. Or, and sometimes, is it okay for me to do that? Obviously, we're not talking about anything illegal here, but you know what I mean. it's almost, I think sometimes it's not up to me to give anyone permission to do anything, but I think sometimes we just need to hear from somebody else that that's a really great idea, go for it. And just having that championing of somebody else is so valuable.
So maybe we've touched on this a little bit, but like, what are some of the common themes that you see when you coach creatives? Like, what is something that you find that we are all just terrible at?
Yeah, I think the lack of strategy is a big one, or not really knowing where to start. So then you don't start. So procrastination is a big one, because I think often people will say, with coaching, well, it's quite an investment, and I could do it myself. And I think everybody's perfectly capable of building a successful business themselves. It just depends how long you want it to take, and if you're ever really going to get to it. So I think procrastinating is a big one. A lack of confidence is another big one, and that often comes from, I think, not knowing what to do, and not knowing if your ideas, how to get started with an idea, and not knowing what to do if it doesn't work. I think one of the biggest learnings I've had over the course of my career is that something not working isn't failure. It's if you use it as feedback and a bit of learning. So it didn't work if I tried it this way, but what other way could I try it? Or maybe my audience isn't big enough yet, so maybe I need to go away and do a bit of audience building before I try this again. So those are the kind of two big pieces. And, that ties in with like imposter syndrome. I think we can all relate to that. And it's paralyzing. All of these things, just, the fear of all sorts of things that we tell ourselves we can't do or we're afraid to do, I think is just what holds us back from starting and making progress. Yeah, so there's lots of facets to it, but I think it's that procrastination and confidence are two really, really big things that I hear from people a lot.
Do you ever find that this is something I struggle with when it comes to like my own business and creativity and everything? Like sometimes I have too many ideas and too many things I want to do. And it's like, okay, how do I figure out what I should move forward? And then like we were saying, like, what things should I just do because I enjoy them? I imagine that might be some fairly common amongst creatives.
Yes. Yeah, it's totally. And I think that's where I come in with being able to be objective about, realistically, is this a good idea and can we get it going quickly? And also looking at what people's business objectives are. Because if you've got somebody who isn't in a hurry to start a business because they've got a buffer of savings and they've got time to explore, that's a different approach to somebody who has been running a business for a while, really, really needs to increase their income quickly. We'd be looking at working on entirely different things. So I think it's helping people prioritize as well, and looking at it and going, really, is this feasible, this idea you've got? Because do you have time to do it? And do we honestly think there's a market for it? So I think it's just, and then it's pick something and start is another big one, because I can totally relate with having lots of ideas and then actually you end up not really ever starting any of them.
Yeah, you just kind of think about them.
And it's lovely to think about it, isn't it? And then you actually just got to go, right, I'm going to commit to this particular idea. The first step I've got to make to start it is picking up the phone and reaching out to somebody. So I'm going to commit to doing that today or this week. And then you can just see where it goes then. Sometimes we have to try things and maybe they don't work and then we try something else, but you can't really try 20 things in one go.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, dear.
So something that you shared that I really liked and it kind of like hit home was you say, unlike creativity, business and marketing skills are learned. They are not inherent. And I feel like no truer words have ever been spoken. If you had to give like 1 to 2 tips on where or how creatives can start learning the business and marketing side, what would some of those tips be?
So I think one of the big things, there are a few, I'm all about asking questions of yourself to help you prioritize stuff. I think the biggest question you have to have an answer to is, why are you running your business? And why are you doing it? Who is it? Who is your work for? What is the purpose of it? Because I think, for creative people, we very rarely start our creative businesses because we want to be bajillionaires. We start our creative businesses because we want to create and be paid for our creativity. But I think you've got to kind of take a slightly business-like approach to it and understand, and have a really clear purpose for it. Because when we've got a purpose, it's much easier to work towards that purpose. And when the going gets a bit tough, you can be like, right, well, this is why I'm showing up. This is my goal for my business. So I know today was a bit shitty, but I'm going to carry on anyway. So I think a business has to have a purpose. Then it stops you from bumbling along and not really achieving anything. And then once you've got a purpose and a goal, you can start to have a look at, well, this is what I want to be doing. What steps do I need to take to get there? So it's almost like having a goal in mind and then working backwards, and then understanding the steps you've got to take. Does that make sense? And just in terms of, I think the biggest thing for business success is having a strategy. And I know I keep hammering on about it, but it's so important. We've got to know, it's like with putting content out on Instagram, for instance, with a creative business. What are you sharing and why are you sharing it? And what's the objective for sharing it? Are we sharing content that's really resonating with our ideal clients, or are we just kind of putting stuff out and we're not sure why? And I think it's just being so clear on what's the purpose of everything you're doing, because that starts to free up time, because you can start to have a look at it and go, well, actually what I'm doing isn't generating me anything, so I can stop doing it. I can do something else instead. So I think the big business piece is what is the purpose of it, and making sure you're taking consistent action towards your goals and towards what it is you want to achieve, because consistency is a really big thing as well for building a business and making it sustainable.
Yeah, that's essentially that's almost exactly what I tell people that are starting podcasts. I tell them, if you're starting a podcast, knowing why you're starting it is the first thing you need to think about, because if you're only getting 2 listens or like one download an episode, you have to ask yourself, you have to go back to that why, because that's what's going to keep you going. So it's exactly like that. So it makes perfect sense.
Yep. So I think, so did that answer your question about tips for business?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, good.
We've got know your why, know your purpose, put together your strategy, and know what your overall objectives are and what consistent actions you can take to get to them.
Yep.
Wonderful tips.
I think that's it. Good.
Yes.
Good.
Wonderful tips. Yes. So another topic that I wanted to touch on that you focus on with your coaching is mindset.
Yep.
And we've kind of touched on a little bit when it comes to like confidence and maybe a little like imposter syndrome, but how much does mindset play into creativity, and how can that affect your business?
So I think is it Henry Ford who said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. You've got to cultivate a positive mindset, because when we feel good, we're more likely to show up and take action, especially when things get a little bit challenging. And I think, like we've touched on with procrastination, one of the big things I often see with people is self-doubt. And when we doubt ourselves, we hold ourselves back. So if you're going to make progress with your business and you're going to turn it into something that's sustainable and generates you income, you have to be showing up and you have to be taking action. And the only way you're going to show up and take action is if your mindset is in a good place. And if you believe in what you are doing, you believe in what you are offering, you are passionate about what you are doing, I think those are huge pieces. And the other big piece that I think ties in with mindset is I see creatives comparing themselves to other people all the time.
Oh, yes.
And that is a huge mindset piece to get past, because if you look at all of the time you spend looking at what other people are doing, either feeling inadequate or telling yourself that they're inadequate, it's a negative space to be in. And you know what? It's a massive waste of energy, because you could be taking all of that time that you're scrolling and making yourself feel bad. You could not do that. And you could spend the time going, right, I'm going to work on my new project, a creative project, or I'm going to make a new piece of work, or I'm going to sit down and write something, or I'm going to go live and talk to my followers. I think this big thing with mindset is you've got to be cultivating a mindset of belief in yourself and keeping positive and upbeat and in a good headspace. And I know we touched on the collective negativity is terrible. I think in terms of the media, and if we take comparing ourselves to other people out of it, if we look at the media, we look at the news, it's enough to make you just not want to get out of bed in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
So I very rarely have much of an idea what's going on, because I don't look at the news, I don't read the news, I don't listen to the radio, because I don't want to be sort of dragged down by the pervasive negativity of everything. So for me, in terms of what I do to keep my mindset in a good space, is I totally tune out of external negative stuff. I meditate every day. I do a bit of yoga every day. I've got a whole stack of creative inspirational business books that I like to read. I like to listen to audiobooks in the car. So I do everything I can to try and make sure my psyche is saturated with possibility, as opposed to the fear that we are surrounded by in the world. So
yeah, that's
a few things there.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Like you said, there's so much kind of negativity that's around us, especially these days, that it's
Yep.
definitely not a bad idea to filter some of that out.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Look, if something bad is happening in the world, you'll know very quickly on Facebook. So somebody will tell you. So, I kind of look at it, and I also look at it and think, what good does it do knowing about stuff that's, political stuff, and that actually is quite worrying, but you can do nothing about.
Yeah.
It doesn't help. It doesn't help. So I think everything you can do to keep, and I'm not talking about, we can't live in total la-la land and in denial. It's just, there's a fine line with what you allow into your brain, and how you allow external things to affect how you're feeling.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's definitely a way to change your mindset, is kind of, like you said, like kind of filtering out the negative, and then taking time to connect with yourself through meditation or yoga or journaling or, whatever.
Absolutely.
Helps you do that. Are there any other ways that creatives can kind of change their mindset?
We've covered quite a few. Look, I think taking the time to make your own work and to give your own creativity some space, and to actually make sure you are committed to making new work, and you give your creativity time and room. I think that's a big thing, because generally when we're creating, we also feel happier. And it's much easier to show up when you're in a good space. And I think there's something about, like I talked about with the Black series that we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, that was work I made. I made it for me, really, for for me, and kind of the message I want to get out, that help encouraging people to adopt shelter dogs. It's a big thing for me. But I literally just showed up, and I shared it as it was, with no expectation, and people loved it. They resonated with it, because I think there's that authenticity in there. So as authentic as you can be with the work you make, and just It's okay to take up space. I mean, hell, sometimes we just need to know that, don't we?
Yeah.
It's okay to take up space and put work out there. It's okay. And give yourself permission.
Yeah, it's okay to take up space. That might be I feel like that's some of the best advice. Okay.
Awesome.
Put yourself out there.
Okay. Yep.
Oh, I love it. As we start to wrap up, first of all, like I'm enjoying this conversation so much. I could definitely pick your brain for hours.
Please do. You know where I am. You're very welcome.
Yes, I will definitely be coming back. We might have to do some future episodes. But as we wrap up this episode, is there anything that you're currently working on that you'd like to share with listeners, or do you have any freebies or anything that you can share?
Yeah, so I've got two freebies that feed quite nicely into our conversation. So there's one called The Confident Creative, which is a 5-video mini course. So you can get that if you go onto my website. I think the links are on most of the pages, but the URL is creativesuccess.coach/confident-creative. And then the other one is I've put together a free pricing guide for creatives as well, just to help you work out your cost of doing business. Because I think just to briefly touch on the mindset around pricing, often we don't know why we're charging what we're charging. So it's difficult to, you're like to figure out of the air, this is what I'm charging. And it's it's difficult to confidently deliver that if somebody says to you, well, why are you charging that? And the pricing guide I put together is just a means of getting to grips with your cost of doing business, going through your finances, which none of us like doing, but it's a necessary exercise to understand why you're charging what you're charging. And then it's easier to really confidently deliver that when clients ask you as well. So that's also on the website. Actually, I think it's on most of the pages on the website. It pops up as a little freebie at the bottom. So nice. That's quite easy to locate.
You mentioned your website, creativesuccess.coach. Where else can folks find you?
So you can find me on Instagram. My handle is at creativesuccess.coach. And if you would like to get your fix of dog photography, my photography handle is at Emma O'Brien Photo. So you can have dog, and there's some cats on there as well currently, dog and cat overload if you would like.
Yes, please. I'm a huge fan of really any kind of animal photography, but especially dogs and cats. So.
Yep, you'll find lots of them there, Allie. There's lots of dogs there.
I will be checking them out. Oh my gosh, Emma, thank you. I really can't thank you enough for joining me on today's episode. And you've shared so much just great information and knowledge. And yes, I cannot thank you enough.
Thank you for inviting me, Allie. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope what I've shared is really helpful for people. Like we said, being a creative isn't the easiest career path to choose. So I hope this has been supportive for the people listening.
Listeners, I will include all of Emma's information in the episode description. So you will be able to find her website, her freebies, and her social media information. And I want to thank Emma again. It's just absolutely amazing. And I will definitely have you back on the podcast anytime you want. This has been wonderful.
Fabulous.
And listeners, of course, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. If you have any questions, comments for my guests or for me, you can text or call me on the hotline 252-419-6004, and we will answer your questions on a future episode of the podcast. Be sure to like, rate, and review the podcast, and you can follow us on Instagram at wandering_creative_. And you can also visit our website at www.cootscreations.com. Thanks for listening. Bye.
This has been a Coots Creations production. Follow the show on Instagram at wandering_creative_ and on Twitter at wandering_pod. For more information, go to cootscreations.com. Like, rate, review, and subscribe. To sponsor the Wandering Creatives podcast, visit www.cootscreations.com/podcast-sponsorship-opportunities. You can also click the link in the episode description below. To be a guest or a featured maker on the podcast, click the link in our Instagram bio or contact us at cootscreationsllc@gmail.com.